3 years later, they fired their Super Bowl winning head coach. They traded the highest paid QB in franchise history. And they traded down in the 2021 NFL Draft. What does it all mean now? Find out during the draft from the premier Philadelphia Eagles reporter, Derek Gunn. Watch, listen to Draft Takes with Derek Gunn across the JAKIB Media Network, YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Day before the NFL Draft edition of Birds 365. Mac McMullen and McDonald here with you. Adding to the mix here on Birds 365 is a more frequent contributor. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, John McMullen, but Ed Kracz is the leader in the clubhouse with appearances on Birds 365.
Yeah. Well, Ed's my guy. I gotta keep Ed in the mix. So that makes a lot of sense. But we've had a lot of big guests. None of them bigger than Ed Kracz from SI.com.
Frequency is important, and we get Eddie up as often as we can. And yes, we also like him because he's as follically challenged as the two regular hosts of this show. Mr. Kracz, how are you this morning?
Hey, I'm great, Jody. I don't know how you did it. I know you were on the airwaves late last night.
How about
here you are again this morning, man. I tell you, pumping that coffee, huh?
Thank you very much.
He's an Iron Man.
Appreciate
now,
that.
Ed, we're getting closer. 36 hours away, Jody tells me. He did the math. That's not my strong point. But I will say, you and I heard an interesting little tidbit from two different sources yesterday. So that kind of led me to say, maybe there's something to this. So talk about the potential player the Eagles really might be targeting.
Yeah, well, I'm impressed Jody's doing math. I mean, very little sleep, and he's doing math too. Man, whatever they're paying,
write it down.
Enough,
I got to write it down. If I don't write it down, I have no shot whatsoever.
You got to take your shoes off too, right? Your hand, your fingers, your toes. I got you. Well, yeah, I think the Eagles love Patrick Surtain, or Surtain, I think is now how it's called. I spoke to the Alabama beat writer yesterday, longtime beat writer. He's from the Camden area, Christopher Walsh, terrific, does a great job covering what really is the 33rd NFL team down there in Tuscaloosa, the Alabama Crimson Tide. And it's Patrick Surtain is how the last name is said. I usually have been saying it's Surtain. But,
yeah, well, you're right. If you look up the pronunciation, it says Surtain.
And we might have to get used to.
Yeah, so I got to figure that out myself.
Yeah, and we may get used to having to say that because I know the Eagles, and speaking to some people, really, really like him. Now, here we are, 36 hours and counting, as Jody said, from the draft. There could be a lot of stuff that's floated out there. It's usually very, very difficult to pin down the Eagles on what they're going to do in the draft. But, I know they like Surtain, and the Cowboys are sitting there at number 10, and a lot of people think Surtain's going to go to Dallas with that pick. So the Eagles have to find a way, if they love him as much as I've been led to believe, and you've been led to believe, John, to get ahead of Dallas at 10 to get a chance to land Patrick Surtain, who would probably be, if the Eagles can get ahead of Dallas, the first defensive player to come off the board in the draft. So
I think he's going to be the first to come off, whether it's 8, whether it's 10, wherever he comes off. I think he's going to be the first defensive player.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, what's it going to take to get? I mean, they've already traded out of 6, right? So they're not going to trade back to 6. I don't think they're going to go to 5 with the Bengals. I think it's too prohibitive. So who does that leave you with? The Lions, the Panthers, and the Broncos. And I think the Broncos are just going to sit tight with their new GM at 9. Probably take whatever quarterback is sitting there at that spot. So that leaves you with the Lions and the Panthers. The Panthers need a tight end, right? If you look at their depth chart, they don't have a tight end. The Eagles have a 3-time Pro Bowl tight end that is bracing for a trade this weekend. Zach Ertz, of course, we're talking about, and I think he's going to get moved. And, he would certainly, in my opinion, be a chip that could be used to get the Eagles to number 8 with the Panthers. Of course, you're going to have to give up more than just Ertz and that 12th pick. Maybe a third rounder. You have 2 in the third round. The Eagles do, number 70, and they have the Colts pick at 84 overall. So you might have to give up the 84th pick, maybe the Panthers have 6 picks in the draft, none of them in the 7th round. And I know, these late round picks aren't supposed to be, very good picks or very good quality players to take in those rounds, but there are players you can take. And, maybe you throw a sweetener in of a 7th round pick or a 6th round pick. The Eagles have 3 6th rounders and 2 7th rounders. So, the Eagles are one to keep an eye on that could potentially trade up to the Panthers, give them Ertz, move up to 8 and grab Surtain there and get ahead of the Cowboys picking Surtain at number 8.
And if the former Alabama cornerback decides that his name is going to be pronounced differently when he gets to the NFL, he's not going to be the first. I remember I went back and forth between Tony Dorsett and Tony Dorsett for years after he entered the National Football League. So you're allowed to do that when you make.
Remember, it used to be Joe Theismann.
Right.
Joe Theismann changed it to rhyme with Heisman, but he didn't win the Heisman.
When he was playing high school football here in New Jersey, yes, he was Theismann. When he was up for a major award in college, all of a sudden he became Theismann. You are correct. On this hypothetical move up by the Eagles to get in front of the Cowboys to take Patrick Surtain or whatever Patrick wants to call himself, would we read into that the type of defense the Eagles are going to be playing? We always evaluate players and how they're going to fit into the system for the last several years after the latest Eagles defense was put in place with Jim Schwartz running it. And Jim Schwartz had a track record, more of a track record as a defensive coordinator, that you could say, all right, here's what I think they're going to plug him in as. Do we read into that the Eagles are going to be more of a zone team than a press coverage team? Because at least the scouting reports I've read, that is a strength more of Surtain than it is of J.C. Horn, who is the other quarterback who'd be sitting on the board. Will this be a telltale that we can read something into as the kind of defense, specifically in the secondary, the Eagles are going to maintain this year?
Yeah, I wish we would have been able to talk to Jonathan Gannon, the new defensive coordinator, before this draft process, but we for some reason he wasn't made available to us. So we're kind of just grasping at thin air here and looking into his past and see what he has done. And he's done a lot of that in Indianapolis and San Diego. I mean, he has run a lot of zone coverage. So yeah, I would suspect that that's what we're going to see. And you're right, Jody, that Surtain is considered a better zone coverage corner than, the press man-to-man type. But listen, the Eagles just need, whatever defense you play, they need cornerbacks. You still are going to need cornerbacks no matter what D you're playing, because you got to stop the pass. In an NFL pass-happy league, you got to be able to stop the pass. So they don't have many of those guys. They have Darius Slay, of course, we've all talked about it, 30 years old, big cap hit number next year, the year after. I don't think he's long for this roster after the 21 season. So they got to find guys. And, a cornerback that they love, they need to do whatever they can to find a way to get him. And what I've been told is they love Surtain. And so you need guys that can just play any defense. And then you don't stop there with just Surtain. You go after and you find another cornerback. I mean, this could be – last year we saw the Eagles gang up at the wide receiver spot, taking 3 guys, 1 in the first round. We could see another draft like that where they take 3 cornerbacks, including 1 in the first round, because they need them. That's the bottom line. Play whatever defense you want. Doesn't matter. You got to have a cornerback to play whatever you're going to line up in.
I do have to mention, Ed, before I get deeper into Surtain with you, the Panthers do have Colin Thompson, Archbishop Wood kid from – he's friend of the show. So I do have to mention that. But if they are interested in Zach Ertz, that would make things easier, because I did look up the Jimmy Johnson draft chart. So if it's going to be draft picks, to move from 12 to 8, say, they're going to have to give up that first third-round pick, which I 70 overall, and they're going to have to give up the fourth rounder that they got from Miami, which I think is 123. Now, when you add that into the mix and say, okay, we're giving up 12, we're giving up 70, we're giving up 123 to go get Patrick Surtain, or do you just wait at 12 and get J.C. Horn? Where do you see the value of that?
Well, first of all, I don't think you're giving up both picks because you're including Zach Ertz.
Well, yeah, I'm saying if you can't get them, if they don't want Zach Ertz, that's what the trade chart says. Right. If you have to go in that direction, do you still see the value there?
No, listen, I would probably still do it, to be honest with you, because if they love a cornerback as much as they apparently love Surtain, then go get him, no matter the cost. You have 11 picks, and I know 70 and the fourth round pick that fourth round pick you got in the trade back with Miami. They're premium picks, no question about it. But I would rather have the terrific cornerback who started all 4 years in the SEC, whose father is an NFL legacy, and if they feel that strongly about him, then yeah, I'm gonna go get him, and I'm gonna give that up. But listen, I would really push hard for them to take Zach Ertz in the deal. I know you love Colin Thompson. I think he ended up at Temple too, so he's not only a good guy. He started at Florida and came back to Temple. So listen, he's a terrific guy. There's no question. I've talked to Colin Thompson, and but No,
I know. I'm just yeah. But real quick to follow up, then Eddie, if you love the kid so much, why dance around? Why drop from 6? Why not take him at 6 and guarantee yourself and not create the headache? Now we know the value, we know the extra first round pick, but then if you can't get it done and you don't get the player you want, you have to settle for J.C. Horn, and I put settle in quotations. Is that Howie trying to be too smart for the room? If you love the kid that much, take him at 6.
Well, then you don't have that extra first-round pick in 2022. I mean, that's a pretty valuable chip. And, Howie was asked about that when he talked to us at his pre-draft availability. And he said that, getting another team's first-round pick is not an easy thing to do. So when you come waving that type of chip in front, under Howie's nose, it'd be hard to say no to that. You take that first-round pick, and then when you come up for a breath of air, and you say, okay, now where are we? We're at 12. We already looked at the board, as he said. We looked to see if there were 12 players that they really liked and they felt comfortable that they would find somebody at 12. But now you're thinking, well, you know what? We love Patrick Surtain. We've talked to him. We've interviewed him many times. Let's see if we can't get up and get him. We're not going to give up a first-round pick. Essentially, they're giving up their 12th overall, but they're getting an 8th. And they're only going to give up a 3rd and maybe, like you said, John, a 4th if it comes to it. But you still have that first next year, and that's a pretty hot chip. I mean, imagine next year when we're going into the draft, these 2 or 3 months building up to the draft, and the Eagles have at least 2 first-round picks, maybe 3 if Carson Wentz gets his allotted playing time. I mean, just how thrilling is it going to be to talk about the potential?
Oh, no doubt.
To have 3 guys in the first round.
Yeah. My point would only be, and sorry, I'm stepping on Jody, but my point would only be is, look, it's great if it works, but if it doesn't work and you can't get back up to get the kid you want and you're settling for somebody else, that's where I think it becomes a little bit shaky. And, if he gets up and gets Surtain and is able to do it, hey, yeah, it's great. But there's a lot of risk there. There's a lot of risk to go back and then assume you can go back up.
There is, but let me jump in here, and it's almost going to sound like I'm playing the role of John McMullen when I make the point that I'm going to make. To cut Howie Roseman some slack, their opinion on Surtain may have changed between when they made the deal and as we sit here today. He may have impressed them more. More scouts may have chimed in. They may think, oh, my God, the Cowboys are screwed if we could stick it in their eye. The value of Surtain on their board may have increased between the time that they made the deal with the Dolphins. So I'm not going to hold them. Well, why didn't you just stay at 6? Well, they might have thought differently at that time, which I think is perfectly fine. Here's where I might have an issue. If we're talking about them trading the back up and getting to, say, number 8, and that's a position where they could take the cornerback to keep them from going to the Cowboys, what if the 5 quarterbacks come off the board in the first 5 picks, and Kyle Pitts comes off the board, and the Dolphins, let's say the Dolphins decide to go wide receiver at 6, and the Lions go Pitts at number 7. What if Penei Sewell is still sitting there? What if this guy, who we were led to believe is going to be an Anthony Munoz type left tackle? Yeah, I know, unfair comparison, but it's what we do, guys. We always compare guys to the best of the best. Sewell, for some reason, has, in some people's opinions, begun to do a little bit of a slip slide down the draft board. What if he's on the board at that point? How do the Eagles, who have forever been an organization that has put an emphasis in the trenches when they're drafting that high, and oh, by the way, you're moving back up to 8, that's high. How do you pass on a guy like Sewell to take a cornerback instead?
Well, you'd have to look at your board very carefully and see who you have ranked there for sure. And you're right. I mean, they love to build through the trenches to the point where I think John in his last mock draft has the Eagles taking Rashawn Slater, would be a terrific guy at 12 also. But you really have to look at your board and stay true to your board, keeping in mind that you still have several more picks to make this weekend, and that you're going to have possibly 10 picks next year to find that guy. I think if you took Sewell, that creates a real logjam at that left tackle spot with Jordan Mailata and Andre Dillard. Would he be an upgrade? Sure he would. But again, I think you have to look at your board and you have to say, you know what, we do need cornerbacks. And Surtain, while he might be ranked a line below Penei Sewell, we have a real need. And I know people say take the best player available and all that, but I think the Eagles are in a position where they don't necessarily have to do that because of the amount of picks they have, and then next year's capital as well. It would certainly be an interesting dilemma, though. I mean, Sewell plays with a nasty, nasty streak to him and would really bring fire and passion on an all-offensive line that's getting older and is going to need some pieces in the coming years. But, again, I think it would depend on their evaluation, and they would have to think long and hard about need versus BPA, best player available. I would still go Surtain.
All right, Ed, a couple things Jody brought up that I think were interesting. One, the Dallas Cowboys. Does this have too much to do with the Dallas Cowboys? Because the Eagles assume the Cowboys are going to go corner. The Eagles assume, and I think they're right, by the way, that they would take Patrick Surtain since he's on the board. Does that kind of goosing them, for lack of a better term? And then the second, this time last year, we were talking about Jeffrey Okudah from Ohio State, who I think ended up number 3 overall. Higher graded prospect for most people. Didn't work out well. Early returns. Very, very difficult position to hit the ground running in the NFL. In the modern NFL is cornerback, because everything's against you. So Jody brought up the value of the position. Penei Sewell, Rashawn Slater. Is the value even there that high in the draft at cornerback? We've seen so many busts in the top 10 at cornerback.
Yeah, we have. There's no doubt. I mean, it's not like he's going to come in and hit the ground running and be this great corner. I wouldn't think coming out of the gate. I mean, the Cowboys had a young one in Trayvon Diggs last year from Alabama. They drafted in the second round, and obviously not a top 10 guy, but he's a guy that needed some time to kind of get his feet under him in the NFL. I mean, you're now going against men more or less in the NFL. You're playing against guys in their mid-20s, late 20s, 30 years old, where in college you're playing against teenagers, many of whom aren't going to see the light of day in the NFL. So it's an adjustment. There's no doubt. And it's a tough position to play. There's going to be some growing pains for sure. But again, if you're Jeffrey Lurie and you're looking at this as a 2-year retool, give him the year to develop. Let him develop, with Denard Wilson as his DB coach and, Jonathan Gannon as his defensive coordinator with that history of working with DBs, and let 2021 kind of be that growth year. And then you come out in 2022 and maybe now he's your top corner because Darius Slay is no longer around. And remember, they're going to take some other corners too, that they're going to develop along the way. You would hope that that's what's going to happen, that they would develop. We talk about all these players in the draft, and, a big key is now you have to have coaches that can teach them how to be NFL players. It didn't happen for, Vernon Hargraves, I think it was, out of Florida. He was a top 10 corner. But it happened with Denzel Ward in Cleveland. I mean, he was a top 10 pick, and he's a pretty good corner. I think Okudah will be fine. You're right. He was a top 5 pick last year with the Lions. These guys take time to develop, especially a cornerback. I think the toughest position to play on the football field outside of probably quarterback is the cornerback spot. And they're not going to come in and be an all-pro the first year, but you hope that they can develop into that type of player. The guy from Alabama, the other corner who plays for the Ravens, whose name escapes me.
Marlon Humphrey. Yeah,
Marlon Humphrey. Yeah. He's another guy that needed to kind of develop, right? But he's one of the best corners in the league. So you have to give these guys some time. So why not, if you're looking at this as a 2022, 2023 situation where you want to be able to contend, give your cornerback a chance to grow in his first year without too much pressure of, having to win 11, 12 games, and then hope that when you can take the wraps off next year, he's ready to go.
And you and John combining on speculation for the Eagles to move up in the draft and get ahead of the Cowboys for a cornerback. You added into the mix. Could Zach Ertz be part of a package that would help entice a team? I got to tell you, we've been trying to come up with a deal for Zach Ertz for months now. It seems like that Zach Ertz's trade is imminent. Well, it still hasn't happened. And Adam Kaplan said this week that look for it to happen either the lead up to the draft or in the draft itself. Except I don't know if that's going to be the case. I think the Eagles have these heightened expectations for what they can get in return for Zach Ertz. I think they've been basically shopping him across the league, and there's a reason that he's still here. The Eagles' evaluation of Zach Ertz and the rest of the league's evaluation of Zach Ertz doesn't match up. Is it just the immediacy of the draft that leads people to believe that somehow those two things are going to converge and is going to be a doable deal? Because I read more into the fact that he's still here, that the Eagles can't get a deal done, then they're going to get a deal done. You think by the time we get to Monday, Zach Ertz is the next Philadelphia Eagle?
Yeah, I really do. And Jody, you're a baseball guy. You know how trade deadlines in baseball kind of spur action. And I think that's similar to the draft is, you're going to see action. I think you could see some other players move too. I know Miami's shopping Xavier Howard, the cornerback who had 10 interceptions for the Dolphins last year. They're probably going to try to move him. And, I think you're going to see some other players get dealt too. So I would be surprised if Zach Ertz is still on this team Monday morning for sure. If it doesn't work out with the Panthers or other teams in play, the Buffalo Bills could probably use a tight end, and they're sitting at number 30 with a stacked roster that is ready to win now. They could certainly afford to trade back and take on Ertz, and the Eagles could try to move up from number 37 to number 30. I mean, I think there are other opportunities. I think with the Ravens, who wanted to trade for Zach last year before he went on the IR, I think they're in play, certainly maybe later in the draft. I mean, there are going to be opportunities to trade Zach Ertz. And, they're not going to get the straight up number 3 type pick for him, the third round type pick that they wanted. But I think they'll get some value in a deal to move him and give him his wish and get him onto his next team. And I think we're going to see it happen. I really do at some point. Here we are. It is the day before the draft. We could see something today, doubt it. But perhaps tomorrow, once that draft starts and the clock starts ticking, we could see the Eagles pull the trigger on Zach Ertz early before the draft goes any further than the first round.
Yeah, I look at Buffalo and 30, Ed, as you mentioned, as a natural spot. The Bills have shown significant interest in Zach. They need a tight end. You can attach him to maybe go up 7 spots. We keep talking about 12, moving up, understandably so. But I think those first 2 picks are connected. In other words, if you have a cornerback, if you get a corner, well, then you have to go a certain direction at 37 or wherever you end up, versus if you draft an offensive lineman, then you probably got to go get a cornerback at 37. So kind of talk about the marriage of those 2 picks. The Eagles have to hit on 37 just as badly as they have to hit on 12, or if they move up at either spot.
Yeah, everybody assumes it's going to be corner, receiver, receiver, corner, and that seems to be the way that they would go. But there is that curveball of needing to build the defensive line out too. But understand too that you can't get all your needs satisfied in one draft or the first 3 rounds of a draft. I mean, this is going to be a process. So after they go first round with whatever they go with, I would assume they're going to come back and try to find that playmaking type receiver, whether it's in the slot, whether it's a big guy like a Rashad Bateman or a Terrace Marshall who has the size, or if it's an Elijah Moore or a Kadarius Toney. But yeah, I think that 1-2 punch will be corner, receiver, or receiver, corner. And the Eagles haven't really had a good 1-2 punch, I don't think, since they brought Zach Ertz in the 2nd round back in 2013 when they went Lane Johnson with the 4th overall, and then Zach Ertz 35th overall. I mean, that was a Mike Tyson-esque 1-2 punch there, and that's what they need here at 12 and 37, assuming they stay at 37. I think they're going to try to, if they don't move up in the first round from 12, I expect them to try to get back into the first round to land that second haymaker. And knock out the first round and then sit tight till the 3rd round.
Let me make my case for the Eagles going with a wide receiver. If you want to ask me what that wide receiver's name is, I'll tell you Devonta Smith. I'm in love with the guy. John McMullen, my partner, not as much. Perfectly fine. But above and beyond the fact that he's going to be a multiple Pro Bowl, all-pro type player, just right now in a vacuum here with the Philadelphia Eagles, am I remembering correctly the Chris Mortensen report that Jeff Lurie said our main objective needs to be to put better pieces around Jalen Hurts than bringing in competition for Jalen Hurts? Correct me if I'm wrong, but they hired an offensive head coach rather than a defensive head coach. I've been saying cornerback is a distinct possibility, but isn't wide receiver where you can most help Jalen Hurts if you get a guy directly that you can throw the ball to? Isn't that what the owner wanted? Haven't we been talking all off season about how involved the owner is, more involved than ever before? Why would we think they're going to go defense when Jeffrey Lurie is the owner of this football team?
Yeah, that's a great point. But you could help Jalen Hurts with that second pick being a receiver because there is talent at that spot. But I hear what you're saying, Jody. And then you had Nick Sirianni come out, though, and say, when he was asked, what does a franchise quarterback look like? He said, well, it could look a lot of different ways. And he's throwing his hands around. It could look a lot of different ways. So it could be a good running game. It could be a good defense. So, maybe you can go with a defensive player, and maybe that helps Jalen Hurts become the franchise player in Nick Sirianni's eyes, but it probably doesn't help in Jeffrey Lurie's eyes. But I could certainly see your case, Jody, and say what you want about Devonta Smith. Listen, I was a big skeptic, just like John was, until I spoke to Chris Walsh. I referenced him earlier from our SI Bama Central site, and he really sold me on Devonta Smith. He's not the tallest guy. He's a great all-around player, but a lot of people don't think Jalen Waddle's that big either. Jalen Waddle's small.
No,
he's just over 5'9". 180 pounds. Smith is a shade over 6 feet and 166 pounds. And yet Smith hasn't been hurt. Waddle has. Waddle hurt the ankle last year. So I've come around on Smith. And if they take him at 12, I'm mighty fine with that. I would certainly take that and run with it. And Jeffrey Lurie would be happy because, they're starting to put weapons around Jalen Hurts. And then you come back with the second pick and you find your cornerback, maybe Asante Samuel or Eric Stokes or Tyson Campbell. I mean, there's certainly depth at both those positions where you could go one way or the other in the first round or with your second pick.
All right, you made Jody happy, so let's get you out of here on a high note, Ed. You mentioned Jalen Hurts. The Eagles got to take a quarterback at some point. Joe Flacco's here as the backup, but he's aged, obviously, and you need a number 3 guy anyway. So they're going to take a quarterback. Where does it happen? Where is the earliest possible position point this team could go quarterback? Day 2, or is it going to be just day 3, late developmental type prospect?
Well, I know where you stand, John. You've already laid your cards out there. You have them going Davis Mills, I believe, in the 3rd round. With that
No. That was one of my earlier ones.
Oh, okay.
My last one had KJ Costello late.
That's right.
7th round pick.
That's right.
They've done a lot of work on KJ Costello, former Stanford guy. They love Stanford kids.
Yep.
Finished up at Mississippi State. Just a roll of the dice, throw of the dart. I think they're looking for quarterback more in 2022, but they're going to take a quarterback. So where do you think that's going to be?
Listen, I think they could go quarterback on day 3 for sure. I don't think they go day 2. And again, it depends on what they do, in the first 2-3 rounds of the draft. If they have 2 picks in the 3rd round, would they try to take a flyer on a Davis Mills or, maybe Kyle Trask, who's mentioned kind of in that same range and played with Brian Johnson at Florida. But I don't think they'll go a day 2 quarterback. I think they'll go day 3, and it's just a matter of where and who. And, your candidates, Sam Ehlinger, Ian Book, Davis Mills, I think will probably be gone. KJ Costello. I like Jamie Newman a lot. Maybe you go in the 5th round and you draft a Jamie Newman from Wake Forest, who transferred to Georgia, of course, and never played. He opted out. But yeah, they're going to find one. And I wouldn't be surprised if they then turn around and sign one as an undrafted free agent, because I think you're going to need 4 camp arms, whatever camp looks like. I think you still want 4 quarterbacks on your roster. So, I think that they'll go day 3. I don't see them going day 2 on a quarterback. Day 3 for sure. It just depends, again, who's sitting there, how early you want to invest that pick, and then you come back after the draft and you sign one, because there are going to be guys out there that they're going to be able to sign. So, it's always exciting to get a quarterback, for sure. They're not going to get one of the top 5 guys, that's for sure. They're not going that direction. So
it's better than Clayton Thorson, and we're okay.
Boy, how about that? 5 guys they picked that year. Sharif Miller was the 4th rounder and Clayton Thorson the 5th rounder. They got nothing from those 2 picks. But yeah, you're right. They have to do a better job, to use Andy Reid's phrase, of evaluating the quarterback position in this draft. And with Sirianni's eyes, you hope that they do that.
Howie's not doing a good enough job to erase that year's draft from league history. He wants to make believe that year never really happened. Ed, thank you much for hopping on with us today. I'm just hoping that you have to have further conversations with your compatriot from down there in Alabama, because the Eagles get one of those key Alabama guys, be it either at the corner and or the wide receiver, with their first-round pick. So continued conversations with Mr. Walsh. Thank you for your continued conversations with us.
Thanks, fellas.
That is Ed Kracz from Sports Illustrated here with us on Birds 365. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. That would make this a Mac affair. We'll come back, continue the Birds conversation.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.